There are 6 words in Hebrew that every Jewish child is taught before almost any others. They are the first words of what is perhaps the most central declaration in the entire tradition, recited morning and evening, inscribed in the mezuzah on the doorpost, and, according to the tradition, the last words a person should say before dying. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The verse is from Deuteronomy 6, verse 4, and the instruction that immediately follows it in verse 5, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Today we read the Shema with Erich Fromm. Fromm wrote about the Shema in several places, but most directly in his 1966 book, You Shall Be as Gods. His study on the Old Testament as a humanist document, in which he read the development of Israelite religion as a progressive movement towards what he called a fully human existence. For Fromm, the movement from polytheism to monotheism was not primarily a theological development, but a psychological one. The movement toward a unified, undivided consciousness capable of a unified, undivided love. What does it mean that God is one? In the ancient world, the question was embedded in the contrast with polytheism. Not many gods, but one. But Fromm was interested in the psychological meaning of the oneness, what it requires of the person who affirms it. A world of many gods is, in Fromm's reading, a world of divided attention and divided loyalty. You pray to this God for one thing and that God for that. You offer here and you offer there. The self that moves through a polytheistic universe is necessarily fragmented, pulled in multiple directions by multiple competing obligations, never fully given to any one of them. The Shema demands something different. It demands the whole person. The Hebrew word Shema means not simply to hear in the auditory sense, but to truly receive. To listen in a way that involves the full engagement of the person with what is being said. It is the kind of hearing that is also understanding, also response, also changed by what has been heard. The rabbis would later develop this into the idea that the Shema requires kavanah, intention, attentiveness, the full orientation of the self toward what is being said. Fromm would note, the first word of this foundational declaration is not a statement, but a command to attend. Before the content, before the theology, before the declaration of oneness, the instruction is to hear, to be present, to stop. This is not incidental. In Fromm's analysis, one of the most fundamental pathologies of modern existence is the incapacity to be genuinely present, to bring the full attention of the self to any one thing. We are, he argued, distracted almost constitutionally, pulled between tasks, between stimulations, between the accumulated noise of a society organized around the management of attention. We half hear everything. We fully hear almost nothing. The Shema begins with the command to overcome this. Before you can understand what God is one means, you have to first become the kind of person who can hear. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. 3 times the word all, not part of your heart, not most of your soul, all, everything, the undivided self given to the undivided God. Fromm was very precise about what this kind of love requires. In The Art of Loving, his 1956 book on love as a practice rather than a feeling, he argued that genuine love is not a state that happens to you, but a discipline that you develop. It requires concentration, the capacity to be fully with the other rather than distracted by the self's own noise. It requires patience, the capacity to remain in the active attention without rushing to the next thing. And it requires what he called the overcoming of narcissism, the gradual release of the belief that the world exists primarily to confirm and extend the self. The commandment to love God with all your heart is, in Fromm's reading, a description of the psychological achievement that genuine love, of God, of another person, of the world, actually requires. It is the achievement of the undivided self, the self that is no longer split between what it wants and what it values, the self that is no longer fragmented by competing loyalties and suppressed desires, and the anxious management of the gap between the idealized self and the actual self. This is not easy. Fromm was under no illusion that it is easy. He was describing a lifelong practice, not a single act. But the direction of the commandment is clear, toward wholeness, towards the gathering of the scattered self into a single act of attention and love. The Shema continues. The following verses in Deuteronomy 6 instruct the Israelites to keep these words in their hearts, to teach them diligently to their children, to talk of them at home and on the road, lying down and rising up, to bind them on their hands and between their eyes, to write them on the doorposts of their houses and on their gates. Fromm would read this instruction with his characteristic attention to the relationship between the inner life and external practice. The Shema is not merely to be believed, it is to be embodied, literally, in the tefillin bound on the arm and head during prayer, spatially, in the mezuzah on the door. It is to be spoken at the transitions of the day, waking and sleeping, so that it becomes the framework within which all daily experience is held. This is what Fromm called the transformation of religion from doctrine into practice, the insistence that what is real in a person's relationship to ultimate values must find expression in how they live, not merely in what they affirm. The person who believes in the oneness of God, but whose daily life is a chaos of competing loyalties and fragmented attentions, has not yet heard the Shema in the full sense that the text demands. There is one more dimension of the Shema that I think Fromm would find significant, and it is the communal dimension. Hear, O Israel, not hear, O individual. The Shema is addressed to the community. It is declared not in private prayer, though it is said privately too, but in the gathered assembly. The affirmation of the oneness of God is a collective act. Fromm was deeply attentive to the relationship between individual psychological health and communal life. He believed that the isolated individual, the person cut off from genuine community, from relationships of genuine care and shared meaning, tends toward the pathologies of the having mode, the accumulation of goods and status as substitutes for the genuine belonging that is lacking. And he believed that genuine community organized not around collective narcissism or the excitement of group identity, but around shared values and the practice of care, was one of the conditions of genuine psychological health. The Shema declares the oneness of God to a community, and in declaring it together, the community itself becomes something, a people that hears together, that affirms together, that is formed by the act of shared attention to a shared reality.